So, hello, everyone. Welcome to Amplifying Her Voice. This is our third global virtual summit, and we are coming to you from the island of Bermuda. We thought we would do something special for Father's Day, and here we are. We're on this beautiful island, ready to take our show to a very interesting part of the world. We've been here for about a week now, meeting with local women's groups and a number of men who are highly supportive of our initiatives. And we wanted to start off our program with a very special speaker who I met almost like 3 years ago now, Rian, in Bretton Woods.
That's right.
We met during the Bretton Woods Summit that Bangor had organized, talking about the global financial system. And here we are in this amazing time period where everything is changing. We've spent about 18 months in lockdown, all of us around the world. And so many of us have been up to some amazing things. And Rianne and I were fortunate enough to reconnect around International Women's Day. And so far have been engaging in multiple conversations and wanted to just talk to her today a little bit about what she's been up to these past 18 months, exciting developments that have been happening in her world. And then we're going to have a deeper conversation about fatherhood and the pandemic and what this has meant for partnerships when it comes to a new paradigm shift. So thank you, Rianne. Please, if you could tell us a little bit about your journey, like pre-COVID, like tell us a little bit about your history, how you've evolved in the work that you're doing and where you're heading now.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's a pleasure to be with you again, Anu, always. And yes, it's on the occasion of Father's Day. And what we're seeing, of course, in the world today is a questioning, aren't we, of what does it really mean to be a father? In fact, what does it really mean to be a man? With many people leaving behind the old rigid definitions, which of both masculinity and femininity, of both motherhood and fatherhood. So I'm looking forward to talking with you a little about that and about the benefits, the tremendous benefits, not only for men, but for children, and of course for partners in the family, women, or, or same-sex marriage or whatever. But first, I do want to bring you a little up to date. As you know, I think most people know me for my book, The Chalice and the Blade. And that book has legs. I mean, it's now in its 57th, I think, US printing. And it just came out in a new translation, a new edition in Spain. And it has absolutely incited a media frenzy of the major newspapers, El País. I mean, everybody. I've had something like a dozen interviews.
Podcasts? Any podcasts? Have you had any podcasts?
Yes, there have been some podcasts, and I can send you some links to them as soon. I think I got some of them, but so that's been really exciting. As for me, those of you who are not acquainted with my work, I really have, in terms of gender roles, shown that how a society really constructs the roles and relations of women, men, and everybody in between is, of course, it's very important as an issue for individuals, for women, for men, but it's also a key social issue. And we'll get back to that. And my work, well, you asked me to talk a little about myself. I've been doing this multidisciplinary, cross-cultural, historical research for, about 40 some years now, using a new method. And this is a very important thing to share with you, because as you know, most studies of human possibilities, of social possibilities, like right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, capitalist, socialist. If you really think about it, for one thing, none of us tell us what kind of society we really have to build to have more equity, more sustainability, more thriving as humans. But all of these categories either ignore or marginalize nothing less than the majority of humanity, women and children. And what my work shows is the link that has been invisible, really, between the status of women, for example, or the status of children in a society, and whether it is generally more equitable, more sustainable, whether it is based on top-down rankings, authoritarian, violent societies, and we see that across the board, whether it's Nazi Germany or Khomeini's Iran or the Taliban or ISIS or well, anyway. And my latest book, and then I'm going to stop, is Nurturing Our Humanity, How Domination and Partnership, which are the two new social configurations my work identifies, how domination and partnership shape our brains, our lives, and our future. And it draws verifying this link between our intimate family, gender, parental relations, and the kind of society and the kind of world we live in.
So the Nurturing Our Humanity, was that written before the pandemic, or are you writing it? Where are you in that
It process? Came out in with Oxford University Press in 2019.
Amazing.
And I really highly recommend it. I had been working, because it takes me a long time to do the research for my books. I had been working on it for something like about 7 years. And I invited then the anthropologist Douglas Fry to be my co-author, not only because he brings a lot of knowledge about different societies. He's an anthropologist, and certainly about neuroscience, but because he is one of the world's experts on how we humans lived for millions, first in proto-history and then in prehistory, and that was in more equitable, more gender balanced, more harmony with nature, in societies that were not matriarchies, because matriarchy and patriarchy, I mean, what, either father's rule or mother rule. They were more partnership oriented. And today, I mean, to really fast forward, a lot of the movements that we have been taught are separate. You know, the environmental movement is over here, and the Me Too movement is over there, and the Black Lives Matter movement is over there, and the environmental movement here. I mean, no, they're all part of the same challenge to traditions of domination, be it man over man, man over woman, race over race, religion over religion, or humans over nature. And we really need that frame, because as Einstein said, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking that created them.
Correct. So let's go to the same thinking now that we've had this incredible shift. We've been focusing on this pandemic as a partnership paradigm shift. And you have a number of thoughts on this when it comes to the role of men and the role of fathers. I'm going to let you share some of your perspectives on what's been going on. Just how this whole transformation, just digital transformation, is affecting all of us.
Well, it's more than a digital transformation, although certainly the speed with which we can now communicate really, well, it has its downsides, but it also has its upsides in terms of new thinking being spread. Um, I think, well, let's talk about the role of fathers, shall we? Because what's been happening um, is something that is very much a very, very important part of the movement towards a partnership oriented society, starting in the family. Because remember what I said, that the conventional categories ignore families practically. You know, I mean, they focus on the progressive ones focus on dismantling the top of the domination pyramid, politics and economics as conventionally defined, but they fail to understand that we must pay more attention to the cornerstones of childhood, of gender, of economics, but moving to what I call a caring economics of partnerism and story and language. So what have men been doing? And it's been primarily young men, but also older men. They have been redefining masculinity. They have been certainly redefining fatherhood. I mean, so many men are today diapering babies, feeding babies, doing this once women's work, right? And what happens is very interesting, because we know from neuroscience that when we care for others, certainly when we care, get chemical rewards of pleasure, endorphins. And men have really been robbed of that by domination gender stereotypes, which have defined masculinity and hence fatherhood as not being like a woman. Women, on the other hand, of course, have been robbed of part of their humanity, being leaders. So women are now entering leadership. Women are becoming more assertive. So it's really both halves of humanity beginning to say, I want to be fully human. And this is tremendously important, not only for fathers, well, men and for women, but for children, because we know that in these more partnership-oriented earlier societies that are described in detail, by the way, in my books, what happens is what they call alloparenting, which is that children have more than one person to bond with, and they grow up much more secure.
And in terms of the shifts, like what's happening right here in the United States, do you feel like we're moving in the direction of some of our more parental favoring nations out in the world? Do you see that shift happening right here in the United States?
Well, I'm very happy that President Biden is now talking about a term that I coined when my book, The Real Wealth of Nations, came out in 2007. And all my books are still completely relevant, if not more so than when they were published, because the times are catching up a little bit. He's talking about human infrastructure, which is so important, always has been, but it is really essential that we invest in our human infrastructure in people. At a time when economists, who are way back in the Middle Ages, actually, in terms of their conceptual frame, but they do get it, that the most important, what they like to call the most important capital, is what they like to call human capital, people, okay? Because if we don't have these flexible, creative people who can work in teams rather than just taking or giving orders, who are resilient, we really don't have the kinds of people that we need to be successful in our post-industrial digital knowledge service era. So but he's also talking, even though the term I introduced, the subtitle of The Real Wealth of Nations is creating a caring economics. And of course, President Biden is talking about caring economy. It got somewhat watered down to only mean the care economy, because I used it to mean an economic system that is guided by caring for people starting at birth and caring for our life support systems. But even though it now means mostly just direct care, whether it's in the market or in the household, uh, we are moving in terms of consciousness. When I say we, of course, we have to remember that in the United States, 70 million people voted for Trump. So obviously it isn't everyone who's moving, but a lot of us are. And that is really because it all hinges on changes of consciousness. Then the action follows, the policies follow.
Absolutely. And this is part of that paradigm. It's the thinking, and then comes the policies, and then comes the programs, and then comes the real impact for women and children, and of course men who are involved in this process along with it. It's an overall shift, and it's we've seen in some of the most advanced economies how this benefits men, how it benefits children at the end of the day when policies work that are more equitable. So this is great. It's a great nudge in the right direction. I think this is one of the positive things that's come out of the pandemic. I want to talk a little bit about your organization. Could you tell us, you're going through a shift in what you've been working on, and what you've been innovating aside from your book? Tell us about your foundation and where you're headed with your work.
Well, I've been the president of the Center for Partnership Studies for 33 years. I mean, this is a long time for a not-for-profit to sort of, be around. And we have now a new website at a center for partnership.org, centerforpartnership.org. And we are also, to really more adequately reflect what we're about, changed our name to Center for Partnership Systems. Still CPS, but instead of studies, systems. Why? Because even though we've done some highly important research and are doing some very important research, I'll tell you about two areas, two pieces of research in the area of economics. One was a study we made that was really a pioneering study called Women, Men, centerforpartnership.org, showing that something that we ignore or just marginalize as, quote, just a women's issue, and therefore in domination thinking not important, actually the status of women is a powerful predictor of general quality of life, of everyone's quality of life. And that study is based on statistical data from 89 nations. Fast forward, because we have had, as part of our heritage from about 5,000 years of domination in the mainstream of human culture, just in the mainstream though, because there have always been pockets and continue to be pockets of partnership in other societies, we have been really working on new metrics, new measures of economic health, not like GDP, which include as productive activities that actually harm and take life, like making cigarettes, selling cigarettes, and the resulting medical and funeral costs. They're all terrific for GDP. Did you know that? I mean, it's crazy, but it's based on an old paradigm. GDP also ignores the enormous economic value of the work of caring for people, starting at birth and caring for our natural life support systems. our social wealth economic indicators, which we first launched in 2014, show the economic value of this work. And we are now condensing what were 24 indicators, which is a lot of indicators, condensing, updating them into a social wealth index. This is essential not only for the kinds of policies we have, where do we allocate the resources? The idea of investing in human infrastructure is supported by, isn't it, a metric that shows the economic value of, for example, take heeding what we know from neuroscience, which is that nothing less than our brains develop in the first 5 years. So investing in early childhood care and education is one of the best investments a country can make. Okay? So we are working on that. And we are now also changing some of our courses, our online courses, to be not at a certain time, but on demand. And we'll be launching the first one of these courses, which is called Changing Our Story, Changing Our Lives, which has 4 videos that I did within the next few weeks. And then we will have one also on caring economics of partnerism. And we are beginning to work now, especially with some of the social innovation hubs, which are multidisciplinary hubs in universities, in various, like the University of Arkansas, Meridian University, to develop course materials. Because we absolutely need a holistic frame that, as I said, doesn't just silo everything. So that, if you really think of the academy now, it is small wonder that progressive people who tend to be more educated also marginalize women and children. Because if you think, there was a book, David Noble, the historian of science, David Noble, wrote a book called A World Without Women, pointing out that Western science about 600, 700 years ago came out of a monastic, celibate.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, think about it. Misogynous, a world without women, but also a world without children, I would add. So no wonder. And if you fast forward, it's only 50 years ago. Just a moment in time that women's studies and then men's studies and then gender studies and then queer studies even got into the university, and they're still marginalized. Mm-hmm. They should be part of the entire curriculum. So that's why partnership studies and the partnership domination social scale, which shows the importance of family, which shows the importance, neuroscience shows this, the importance of this hidden system of gendered values, where there's always enough money for prisons, right? For punishment, like in the punitive domination-oriented family, male-dominated family, or for weapons and wars, but somehow we don't have enough money for caring for people, for healthcare, for childcare. It's reality. In The Chalice and the Blade, I have 2 chapters called Reality Stood on Its Head. And what we are really in the business of today is standing reality right side up again. That is the shift from domination, where there are only 2 alternatives: you either dominate or you're dominated, to partnership, where there is a partnership alternative, not sameness. On the contrary, the valuing of difference. Starting with gender, really, and then, of course, race and religion and sexual orientation is all part of the same, really, domination system.
We're seeing this with nations as well. So just the shift in the global economy, the global the global need for one humanity, as opposed to so many different, we're better than them, they're better than us. It's literally, this has forced us to be thinking about oneness, but more than anything, one humanity.
Absolutely. And I think that we have to understand that people who are today, because it's a time of radical change, fundamental change, happens in times of great systems dislocation. And it is at this time that not only can we make change, like climate change, the COVID pandemic, the shift to the post-industrial age, but people who grow up in rigid domination environments, they will pull back because it's familiar. They feel safer. And so we have to understand this. It's not a question of that they've been ignored economically. People who voted for Trump, actually, studies show two things. One, they share a terrible discomfort with women who are assertive, who are full human beings. And two, in terms of their parenting, they are more interested in obedience, in the old values, of fealty, of obedience, rather than in the new values of equality and domination and really equity and human development. And I think we have to understand that they come from this legitimacy. They grew up that way, and we know that the part of the brain that helps us adjust to change is less developed. Eventually they get there, but it's harder for them.
Yes. And now it's almost like we're being forced to stretch whatever we have traditionally been comfortable with. I think now it's the time to, we've all had to try different things. We've all had to adapt. This is the moment where if there's going to be a shift, the shift is happening. It has to happen. It's happening now. So it's such a great time. And, the work that you're doing is timely. It's almost like it's been building up to this moment, and it's reaching its full potential. And we absolutely want to get behind you. The State of Women Institute is so grateful to have you as one of our advisors, our most cherished advisor, I should say. And you've been such a part of this dialogue, and all of the contributions that you're making, all of the important insights that you're sharing. It's not just for the women that are part of our global dialogue, it's for the men as well. And especially today, especially for Father's Day, honoring all of these men who've pulled their weight during the pandemic. Thank you to all of you. And just, a few words that you can say to the men who have been really stepping forward. And we know what the situation is. Women have taken a bigger brunt of the pandemic, more so than the men.
Very much so, but because of the devaluation of the so-called feminine, the so-called soft, caring, caregiving, nonviolence, which are human values. Men have been drilled into thinking that they have privilege because everything is ranking in domination systems. You may be the most, the peon or the serf, right? But you can control women and children in your family. So it's a system of these rigid rankings of domination. But consider that men's privilege has been a mess. For one thing, men have historically had to give nothing less than their lives because some guy on top wanted more real estate. And it continues, doesn't it? It's crazy. Think of the real privilege of being fully human, of getting those endorphins, those rewards of pleasure, because you are expressing your full humanity through caring, through caregiving, through putting love into action. And that's what men now have said enough. So many men are saying, no, I want to be fully human, and I congratulate you. And I want to say again, this is not only vital for men, and for women and for everybody in between, but it is essential for children, and it is essential for the shift in society, not from right to left or from left to right or from capitalism to socialism or vice versa, but from domination systems, from a top-down economics, from a top-down family to a more partnership-oriented way of living where there's still hierarchies, but they're hierarchies of actualization, of empowering rather than disempowering. And where really we can at last begin to explore what being human fully means.
And this is so beautiful because when we first reached out to you, I said, Rianne, I want to be your slave. Do you remember this? And you said, no, I want you to be my partner. We're going to do this together. And it was funny. It was said in jest, but at the same time, like the work that you do is so very essential. And it's different organizations that are out there, different women's groups like you have been so supportive of the work that we're doing with Amplifying Her Voice. Like this is such an important time where our voices need to be heard, and everybody has something to say. Everybody has been through this together, and just, you stepping forward and helping us lead the way. There's so many minds out there that are just ready for this new wisdom. So we thank you for this contribution, and the work that you're doing, however we can support, however we can amplify. There's a number of people that are watching us here today that are social media influencers. And I'm going to put some content out there for all of you to share Rianne's great work. And if you could please share her foundation's mission and the new programs that they're launching. There may be something in it for you or people that you know, but this is all like, it's a new way of thinking. It's a holistic way of thinking. And most importantly, it's built on so many years worth of research. And it's not just something, someone came up with in the past 18 months. This is something that's so well researched and so highly relevant. And it's not just our nation, but it's other nations that are going to be picking up on this great work. You mentioned it earlier today, like your book has come out in Spain. Tell us how many languages like your work has been featured in, Rianne?
Oh my gosh, I wrote it down, and because my husband was doing something, and I cannot remember, but I think, well, it's certainly, I think it's in about 27 languages, but there have been, in terms of international editions, about almost 60 international editions of my books. I mean, not only of The Chalice and the Blade, which is still, I mean, it's so interesting because it was the first book reporting the findings from my multidisciplinary, cross-cultural, gender-balanced, yes, study. I mean, which distinguishes it really is from other approaches, and includes the family, which I mean, how, with what we today know about neuroscience, I mean, I have to repeat this, it's really crazy that most studies of society don't look at what happens in families when they have such an influence on nothing less than how our brains develop and on how these 70 million people voted for Mr. Trump. For a man who sees only two alternatives, you dominate or you're dominated. I mean, it is really strange, but we're going to change it.
Yes, and we're all here now. We're all here now together, and this new paradigm is in progress. I wouldn't say we're completely there. It's happening. Change takes time. This whole mind shift takes time. I think there's beautifully, and aptly, I think there's a lot of men who are pushing for this as much as women now, which I'm finding in my own world. Just in my generation and, in Gen Zs and millennials, they're all, saying this is the way it needs to be. It should be. We need to do this together. So I think everything that we've touched on today has really hit the nail on the head in terms of what we wanted to share with our audience and generations who are going to be watching this recording after we're done. So I thank you, Dr. Rianne Neisler, thank you so much for joining us again today. And we look forward to continuing this dialogue with you as we build out our movement, as you build out your new new foundation with the new entity, and seeing how we can partner and support one another going forward. So thank you again for joining us, everyone.
So thank you, Nanu, and thank you all for joining us too. Yes, we can do this. You know, human societies are human creations. We can make them better.
Thank you.